everybody, welcome to Drive Thru Review 367. Today's going to be a little bit different of a review. So I was talking to some folks and I am going to be playing, not yet, but tomorrow, Dune the board game. And this is the copy that I have. This is a print and play production. This is, I think you pronounce it Ilya or Ilya, and their files is up on Board Game Geek, and you can print this out and make this yourself. I did have Andrew Tolson of Print and Play Productions craft this for me some time ago, and finally we're getting around to playing it in my group. So I was talking to some folks and I've been reading, and there's been a lot of rule updates and variants and things since this game was originally published in 1979, I think. And so I've been very much looking forward to playing this game for several years, really. I started getting into board gaming, well, around the time about 2004 was I really got into it. You know, I'd played some other games, you know, a few years before that sporadically, but I wasn't really into it until then. And then I had a buddy of mine that you know, I'd go play with his family and stuff, and we'd play different things, and then I was learning about games. That's when I got into Board Game Geek about that time. And you know, at some point I learned that there was a Dune board game, and I was like, that's really cool, because I've read the original series of the 6 books written by Frank Herbert 3 whole times all the way through, and really enjoy the first 4. You know, the next 2 are kind of weird, and he kind of tries to pull in like some human history into it, and it kind of goes off on a tangent, and it becomes really less about Dune itself. Dune is very much more of an indirect, or Arrakis, the planet's more of an indirect actor, if you will. But I read those books in high school originally, and really, you know, kind of wear myself on my sleeve a little bit. They really had a profound impact on you know, how I think about things. So that's a whole other video, but it's a very interesting world. I mean, you have this whole spice thing, which is at one point a kind of like the oil or the energy or whatever powering travel through the universe, but it's also, you know, expanding like a religious kind of consciousness, and you know, sort of spirituality connected to the same thing, and it's all in space, and there's some cool, you know, space stuff, and there's some strange power struggles, very Games of Thrones-y types of power struggles, and there's a lot of commentary on, you know, society in general and all kinds of crazy stuff, and it's really wacky and whacked out. So a high school kid like myself would get really into it. So I've been looking forward to really playing this game and researching all the rules changes and everything, like I was saying, and seeing what the best way to play it was. And I was talking to somebody on Twitter, and they said, hey, why don't you do a video like before and after, since you really kind of hyped this up in your mind about what it's going to be like and everything. So what am I expecting, and then what happens? So we're going to play it probably only once tomorrow, but we're going to try to play it twice and see if that can work. If we have a really long first game, then we won't play it twice. But my understanding is that the game can go for about an hour or so to about 6 hours, depending how things work. Now, if you're not familiar with the game, I may break at some point and give you a quick overview or something after I've played it, but there's at least 2 really good videos about how to play generally. Now, the core structure is dirt dead simple. It's by some of the designers for Cosmic Encounter. You can see right there, I think. And so the core structure, like the you know, like the lever mechanics that you're going to pull, are dead simple. And then you add on top of that, in this case, 6 different houses, or 6 different factions really, of power and special abilities that go with each one of these, and all of those kind of interact with different parts of the turn in different ways. So one example off the top of my head is the Atreides can interact during the auction period when you auction and get new special cards and new powers. And the Bene Gesserit and the Fremen can do different things at different parts of the combat. So if you have combat, different things will happen. And the Harkonnen has this kind of treachery advantage, and traders, they get extra traders and things that you can call during combat. So the core system is super dead simple and very easy to digest. The actual, I've got like 3 rule sets in here now, and the original kind of rule set that's been reformatted slightly is only 8 pages long. You know, for such a kind of epic game, that's pretty good. But then all of the, I guess, the subtlety and things are going to come out of all the player interactions and the powers. And the other thing you can do is, of course, you can win as an alliance. Now, I've been recommended by more than a couple of folks to only allow alliances of 2 people to win, because 3 people is going to be half the game. We're going to play with 6 players. We're going to discuss a lot of things. There's advanced combat and basic combat, and there's kind of advanced powers and basic powers. We're going to play with all the advanced powers, or Some of the books call them optional powers. I'm going to just say they're the advanced player powers. We're going to play with all of those. We're going to play with the Karama cards, and those are kind of activate different abilities, and the Bene Gesserit get a bonus there because they can discard these worthless cards. So we're going to play with all those extra powers. But then the combat itself, I think we're going to do, from what I understand, the Fremen have a little bit of a disadvantage, but if you let them play with using basic combat and force everybody else to use advanced combat, which they have to spend spice to get the full use of their troops out of, that kind of brings them into balance. And I think in one of the rule books I have that marked as an official WBC variant. So that's all the mechanics and stuff. That's fine. So we're going to discuss some things like that and a couple other things. We're going to kind of sit down and just hash it out. I don't really know that it really matters because it's all of our first time except for one guy, and he's only played his second time or third time or something. So it's been a few years. But for me, like I said, I have a kind of a historical connection to the material in the books. And in terms of what am I expecting in regards to that, I feel like it's kind of already there for me from reading the rules and the fact that you can have alliances, because you take the Bene Gesserit, which is not really a house. You have the Harkonnens and the, I'm spacing on the emperors, Carino, that's the emperor at its time, and then Atreides, and there are some other houses that aren't really mentioned. But the Bene Gesserit always kind of work within those houses. It's an all-female sort of, very hard to explain, almost like an order of wizards in a sense, because they use the spice and they're able to sort of see the future a little bit and have the power of voice command to kind of make you do what you don't really want to do. And they've got some other tricks, and they're very crafty, and they've got their own special language that they can do with their hands. But so they're not really a house per se. They don't officially have any power, but they work within the houses and try to exist as an organization to bring about the creation of the Kwisatz Haderach, which is sort of like a messiah, which is really bizarre. And there's other organizations like this, and then you can play the Guild, who also isn't really a house, but they're kind of like the businessmen and the bankers. They also control the travel, and they need the spice to do the space travel. So those two kind of organizations feel to me like the most integrated in terms of in the case of the Guild and the Bene Gesserit, the biggest a-holes of the universe, because they don't really have any legitimate, like, human emotional, like, connection to the universe, because they're in a struggle for power to prop up a society in a sense, so they're kind of beholden to the community and the social fabric of the universe. It's a weird, I know it's kind of strange philosophical thing, but they're not like Atreides or even Harkonnen, who are a bunch of bastards, that have families, right? They just have like their school of thought and that whole thing. And so it's, in terms of like a game mechanism, they seem to be the most fitting, because, when you sit down at the game, you don't bring in the fact during the Atreides, spoiler alert, I'm gonna spoil a little bit of the first movie or the first book, the loss of Paul's father and Jessica's husband, and all that kind of stuff. So that's a very emotional part, very human part of it. And the Bene Gesserit and the Guild, they don't exist as entities in that sense. So when you play a game, you don't usually bring in that kind of baggage of, family relationships and things. So that's kind of interesting. So I think we're going to do the factions randomly, but I think I'm going to kind of gravitate towards one of those more anonymous style organizations, because I think it fits kind of a gameplay more. And if you're kind of saying to yourself, why is he going off on these tangents? Well, you got to kind of read the books, because there's a lot of philosophy and a lot of sort of religious undertones, and and kind of your station in life kind of ideas, and the machinations of power and stuff, and how different people will have different effects, and the effects of the masses on the power and the individuality of the people in power. So if you've read Game of Thrones, they're not alike at all, but there's some similarities there. So anyway, from a game perspective, that kind of stuff really intrigues me, because you have sort of the dynamics of the table, and then everybody at the table is kind of putting themselves in this sort of strange role. And it's interesting to me because so now I'm sitting down to play this game, and I have all these expectations and all these kind of thoughts running in my head, and these characters from the books and everything. And that all is at the table. Where most of these games I play back here, probably 90% of them, I have some outside influence coming into the game and some expectation. You know, if it's a sci-fi game like Galaxy Defenders or Eclipse, I've got some of those, you know, movies and stuff playing in my head and some of the books I've read. Or, you know, if I played Freedom, which is somewhere here, yep. And, you know, then I have our series history and stuff, and there's a zombie game, Imperial Settlers. So I have some of that stuff sort of coming to my subconscious level when I sit down, but nothing really at the forefront. Probably, except more than this one here, because like I said, I read the books 3 times. I watched the entire miniseries that was on Sci-Fi twice, probably the first part 3 times and the second part 2 times. And then I've watched the you know, David Lynch production however many times in bits and pieces, and I'll fire up a part on YouTube and I'll fire up the soundtrack if I'm trying to zone out at work and write code. So I have like all of this stuff coming in, and I expect the game to be good. The rule set seems good. A lot of people say it's good. It's by the designers of Cosmic Encounter, which I've recently played for the first time, and I really enjoyed that. Really got into that. And so there's a lot of there's some high expectations there. And from what I'm reading of the powers that each faction has, they seem very relatable to the style of characters and things in the books and what capabilities they had in the stories and things. So going into that, I think it's going to be fun. So I will come back, and then there'll be a cut here, and then I'll maybe play some Dune music or something, and then I'll come back and tell you like what I thought of the game after playing at least once, if not twice, hopefully. And maybe I'll show you some pieces or something. But this is just me. You can minimize me, of course, and just listen to like as a podcast. But there are 2 other really good videos. One off the top of my head is on Board Game Geek. If you go to the Dune page and sort videos by thumbs, it's got like 300 thumbs. It gives you kind of a history of all the prints and the production of Dune and all the different revisions and things that have come out, and some of the little mini expansions and stuff, and it gives you a basic overview of the core rules and not really any of the player powers. Like I said, the core rules are very simple. So I'm going to break away now, and then in a flash or a couple of seconds I'll come back, and then I'll be wearing something different, and then I'll tell you what I think of it. So I hope that didn't ramble too much. Yep. So put some questions and things like that, you know, we can discuss about it, make a little bit more back and forth than my normal reviews. But I thought it was a cool idea, and maybe I'll do this with other games. I don't really know, but this one I have like a lot of expectations that it will be good, first of all, yes, but also, like I said, I have a lot of baggage. I'm kind of coming to this game with baggage, which is very different than most other games, because there is a direct kind of emotional connection to the source material. All right, so be back in a second. And I'm back. So my prediction actually did come true. We got to play 2 games. We actually had a turn 2 win in our first game by the Harkonnens, and then a turn 7 win by the Harkonnens and the Guild. So the first game was very interesting. The Harkonnen kind of had 2 basic strongholds that they grabbed early on, and the rest of us were kind of getting set up. And then he came into the 3rd stronghold where one of the Fremens can put in Siege Tabur, if I remember. And I was pretty well off, and then the Fremen actually played a Karanma card to see everything that was going to be in their battle plan, and I took a look at it, and so I was dead set, and I was very confident that I was going to be winning the game, and so I put in my lowest leader, because I didn't even really need a leader, but you have to put a leader in. So I put in my leader that was worth 2, Jameis, and lo and behold, the Harkonnen had the traitor card for that leader. It was hilarious. So if you play a traitor card, you just automatically win the battle. And the Harkonnens, of course, they start with 4 traitor cards. Everybody else just gets 1. So that was hilarious. So we wiped the board and set up the game again. And so that was, again, a 7-round game. A lot more fighting, a bloodbath, alliances forming and reshaping and all that kind of cool stuff. So even the first game, it was our first game, so I can kind of see some of the awkwardness of, you know, the setup and you know, sort of the, you know, we don't really understand quite you know, the setup of the board position, and, you know, all the dynamics of the proximity of one place to another and things like that. But even though that happened, it was still really fun. But what do I think of the game? Well, I thought it was really fun. Everybody really, really liked it. Nobody really came away with a bad taste in their mouth. I think the first game took us, we kind of played like a fake turn, and then we kind of restarted, but with our initial startup. And that was probably like an hour and a half or so, just for 2 turns, which is kind of crazy. But then the second game, I want to say that probably took a little over 4 hours. Went a little bit slow in some of the combat parts, but again, kind of our first plaything. So we did a 7-turn game, which I think is about average for a win from what I've read. We did 7 out of 10 rounds. I know you can go a full 15, but I see a lot of variants. A lot of people say, just do 10 and you'll probably end the game before that anyway. So that seemed to work out pretty good. So there's like 8 parts to a turn, and that's kind of why I go over each part of it. I think I've got like 3 different rule books here, but this one's easy. And I kind of tell you what I think about the different houses in the game and how they interact with. So I'll kind of do this quickly. The first thing is the storm, how the storm moves around the board. I like that because it adds a certain amount of pressure and keeps things kind of moving, because if you go in and try to grab spice, from a certain part of the board, you only collect as much spice relatively to however many troops you have. You 2 per troop unless you have a harvester bonus. So you can't just kind of sit on the spice and slowly gather it. The storm's going to be moving around and stuff like that. So you've got to keep your troops in a safe position, don't leave them out in the open. So I like that. And there's an unpredictability to the storm, but it's going to move a certain amount. One interesting thing is you have a atomics card. I actually had that in our second game, and I was talking about it with my alliance partner. I was the Emperor and he was the Atreides, and we knew that we could use it to kind of wipe the Harkonnens out, blow up the shield wall and then open up a lot of their troops to getting wiped out. But it kind of shook out to the point where when it came my time to deploy troops, because you have to put troops by the shield wall to blow it up, they were in really good shape, the Harkonnens, and I was in good shape. I had a lot of troops in one of the sieges across. I don't remember the name of it. And so I was like, okay, well, maybe if I ally with him on the next turn, then we can get a victory. So I didn't blow it up. I kind of played like I didn't know what I was doing and just deployed that. And then he was like, oh, you should have put a guy, we kind of whispered, and I was like, oh yeah. And so that happened. So that's a pretty interesting thing. You can kind of wait till that storm comes around and then play that right as before that storm hits, and then just destroy a bunch of troops there, because those are two valuable strongholds to get, because you get the ornithopters and the harvesters and all that stuff like that. But I held on to it, and I was thinking I would get to play it again, but the game ended before that happened. So I like that dynamic there of the storms. So the spice blow, that's just like random stuff that happens. Spice blows up on different parts of the board and people gather it, and there's possibly a Shai Hulud card that comes up, and then people can redo the alliances. I really like that part. I think that would be cool to see in other games where you have this sort of negotiation phase that's somewhat random, because you kind of feel like, oh man, I'm still stuck on this alliance. I'd love to jump ship right now, or I'd love to break out of this and try to win alone or something. So that's pretty cool actually how that works. So, as you flip spice cards, you can flip these Shai Hulud cards. And then also the Fremen can make use of those Shai Hulud cards. If you get more than 1 per round, they can ride the worms and basically move to any spot on the board, which is awesome. And they can dictate where it goes up, so they can, have the worm go slam a territory and wipe everything out there. So that, to me, even this little piece here of the way that flipping up the spice blow and then, maybe getting a worm card to change the negotiation dynamics, but also kind of thematically applies to one of the factions. I mean, that's just crazy. I love that. I mean, to me, that really blows me away. And there's a lot of things like that in this game. If you're familiar with Dune, especially, you're like, oh, wow, that's totally, I get that, I get that right into the theme and stuff. So that's pretty neat too. Let's see. And then you bid on the cards. And here's the next thing. So you're bidding on these cards face down. You deal out cards from the treachery deck equal to the number of players, and then you kind of go down and everybody gets a chance to have the first bid. The Atreides player can look at the current card that's being bid on, so they know what it is. And they can write down all of the stuff that they see. So it actually says in the rules, the Atreides player is the only one that can take notes. And so the Atreides player is like, okay, that's cool, sure, that's that card. And so he knows Billy has this card and Frankie has this card and so on. Now in the second game, as the Emperor, I get all the money when people buy the treachery cards. So instead of paying the bank, you pay me. Well, I was allied with the Atreides player. So he would look at the card, and then we would kind of, let it go. And then I could give him money as part of my ally ability. He could say, hey, let me have some money for that, because I've got plenty of money anyway. And so we had a nice little combo working with that. And that's the other kind of neat thing about the game, is based on who you kind of ally with is really going to change the game even mechanically and how that works. Because earlier in that game, as the Emperor, I was allied with the guild, and the guild collects all the money for deploying troops. And that's pretty cool because we would build up, we could have, if we held the alliance, build up a massive money. And so not only can I collect money from the treachery cards, and he collects money from when people travel, because when you deploy troops you pay him, then I can use his discount to deploy, and we could really slam in a lot of troops and stuff. So the mechanics of that, it's really cool how the alliances shift. And so, by the way, we played where you couldn't have an alliance of 3, only a maximum alliance of 2. Because I had read a line and we kind of talked it out a little bit afterwards, and it seems like you kind of get into a point where it's like, oh hey, let's all 3 align and just strangle everybody, and then that's it. So it's like the 3 strongest could win. So I think I'd like to try it with the ability to do a 3-person alliance, but I really liked it with 2, and I think I would just like to try it with 3. So that's a bidding, and then the next thing you do is revive anybody that's dead in the tanks, and everybody gets a different amount of revivals and stuff. We did kind of look at a variant that actually is introduced in the Duel expansion, where you can revive one of your 10 cost leader, because normally you have to have all your leaders wiped out and in the tank before you can actually revive one leader. I think we would do that because the way that the 10 power leaders are tied into is once they're dead, then you kind of have deactivated a lot of your powers for your faction, which is really brutal. But on the other hand, it makes you, kind of keeps you from committing those leaders very early, which would be kind of dumb. But the Harkonnen have the ability, when they win a battle, to snatch one of your leaders from you. So we kind of dug through the rules and we're like, they shouldn't be able to take the 10 from you. And we couldn't find anywhere where it prevents that. So I think there's a little bit of a wonkiness there. With the the interaction of the Harkonnen ability with that, and they did win 2 in a row, but so you don't want to lose to the Harkonnens, because then they can really screw you over. So the movement is very simple. You make a payment and then drop guys onto the board, and then you're going to pay the guild, and then you can do like one move. But again, the Fremen can fly all over the place with the worms. They come onto the board basically from the other side of the planet, from the south. They don't have to pay the guild, and they can dump a whole bunch of guys out. When the Bene Gesserit come out, whenever I put a deployment out, or anybody puts a shipment or deployment out of troops, they can put one of their troops along with wherever they deployed it, or into the sort of neutral region in the center. And so they don't really have to spend a lot of time and a lot of money paying Spice to do the deployment. They just kind of sneakily get out, and then after a while, all of a sudden you realize, oh, there's Bene Gesserit everywhere. So that's pretty cool how they do that. And the Bene Gesserit have an ability to, they have the double-sided tokens where you can flip and then make them sort of invisible, and they kind of coexist, and then on a later turn they can kind of poop, it can pop up and then surprise and have an attack and stuff. The battles, I mean, you can go watch some of the other videos of how to play, but you've got this cool dial mechanism, you've got the treachery cards, which are very interactive. The treachery cards kind of remind me a little of Twilight Imperium 3, but probably more balanced somehow, but also very interesting and thematic, and there's a lot of interesting stuff that happens with that, because again, the Fremen, or always is, the Atreides know pretty much a lot of the cards that people have. They probably know half of the cards that the Harkonnen have, because when the Harkonnen buy a card in the bidding round, they get 1 off the top of the deck, and they can have 8 cards instead of 4. There's some cool stuff you can do with the cards. We did have one card called Residual Poison. I think we're going to remove that. We actually searched on BGG while we were playing, because there's some game-breaking kind of strangeness where you put this card in front of somebody, you put a certain amount of spice on it, and they have to pay you that every round or kill off a leader, and it's your choice. The other thing is you can bluff and put it out, but you have to pay double to the bank if you get caught in the bluff. And it's like, well, what if you don't have the money and you do that? Do you just pay everything into the bank? There's not really any clear rules on it, and we just don't like it anyway. So I think we'll totally remove the residual poison from it. So, in general, I think this is something we want to play again for sure, at least a couple of times. And very thematic. I think you definitely got to play with the 6 players like everybody recommends. I'd be open to trying it maybe with 4 or 5, but no less than that. There are some variant rules in there. But it was a lot of fun, if you look at kind of thematically how the different houses work, it really fits with, the story and each of the different special abilities and how the dynamics of those works. And a lot of it has to do with the amount of information available to the players. So I'd like to play again where the first game I was the Fremen, it was over so quickly, and in the second game I was the Emperor and allied with the Guild for a little while, and then with the Atreides, and then I could really see, how that would work again with the Harkonnen, and Bene Gesserit were aligned, and then maybe the Bene Gesserit and the Atreides could be aligned, and that could be pretty powerful. And so the idea of the intrigue and the machinations and the plots within plots and all that stuff, that really kind of comes through, because you can shift alliances at different points, but you don't get to control when that happens. So a lot of stuff, kind of these, the whirlwind of chaos is happening around you. You do get that feeling. And you also, we've learned from the second game, you need to be careful about when you commit certain things, and when you kind of push forward with a lot of troops, and maybe you're some of your bigger leaders, because it is difficult to get your guys out of the tanks. If you get a lot of damage and a lot of guys, and you lose, and like 15 of your troops are in the tanks, they're going to slowly come back, because it's at a maximum of 3 per round. And once your leaders are in there, they're kind of in there until you've lost all your leaders. So like the books, a lot of times, you have sort of the winners in the history of Dune and in the series are the ones that kind of waited in a very, almost like The Godfather, if you watch those movies, the ones that kind of waited and waited and waited till it was their perfect moment to strike. And that really comes through in the game itself. And that's what I think kind of the takeaway is that, you've got to be very, critical. And it's a game that you've got to kind of learn the ins and outs of, in terms of like giving away tells and doing certain things. And like there was one point in the second game where I was like, the two people sitting there were like, okay, he has a traitor for you. Okay, we just knew he did by his sort of behavior and stuff. And so that was very interesting. So you kind of pick up on the tells, and you kind of learn a little bit of the intricacies, like the nooks and crannies of what people do and how much they commit to a certain action and where they go, and he's probably going to do this because he has this power, what's going to interact. So you kind of learn sort of the characteristics of the different houses and stuff. I think the takeaways to me are the mechanics changing based on the alliance is really cool. And I don't know, it was something that was kind of in my head while I was playing, but now it's kind of lost, is taking like the things I was alluding to earlier yesterday when I recorded the first part, was taking the subject matter and transforming it into the game, and picking out the important parts in relationship to it being a game or a board game. Because, for example, the Bene Gesserit are never really, in the books, out in any force. You never see like an army of Bene Gesserit. That's not their style. They're always like an advisor, to different houses, or there's even a Bene Gesserit that's out with the Fremen, sort of like a missionaries type of thing. And in the game, it's feasible after a while, once you've kind of dropped these, coexisting sneaky little advisors down, that, there's a little army of Bene Gesserit. Now that wouldn't happen, it's not very thematic to the book, but through the process of these abstract mechanical decisions that the designers made, it still leads you into the relationship, with the source material and everything. I think they should really reprint this damn thing. Somebody needs to do it. The Herbert folks need to pull their head out of their rear end and let somebody do it. And then I think people also should go back and kind of redesign it. Not like a lot, though. I don't think a lot. Because, like, let's take, for example, the whole Bene Gesserit prediction thing. Yeah, it's a fun mechanic, and I could see not touching that as well, but I could see some discussion happening around that, where maybe you let them change their prediction like at one point in like the third round or something, so that they can sort of tack that. So it makes it a little bit possibly more meaningful. Now the Bene Gesserit, of course, by predicting, can ally with somebody and say, I think that the guild will win in the 5th round, and then they're allied with the guild, and then they help them win in the 5th round. So then the Bene Gesserit solely win because their prediction came true. That trumps all the wins. So you have to be careful about allying with the Bene Gesserit, but also, the Bene Gesserit can do a little bit of manipulation to try to get somebody else to win as well. So, and like I said, it's only our second play. So, but I think there's probably some things like that continuous poison thing or whatever it's called. That could be removed. And there's definitely some tweaks. I could see them revisit it. Move it from 15 down to 10 rounds. Possibly, implement the only, as an official rule, only allowing 2 people in an alliance. But I could see the 3 as well. So, it's nice because there's a lot of open-endedness to it, which is cool, but you know, on the other hand, if I want to try to craft like the best experience possible, there are some tweaks that I could see if they were ever reprint this. And they have kind of reprinted it as Rex, but you know, 80 to 90% of me playing this is because it is Dune, like I said, and I think that's for a lot of people. Anyway, lots of rambling and stuff, but that's kind of like a before and after expectations and things like that. So anyway, if you haven't played it yet, I would say print it out, or you print and play, or find an eBay copy or something. And you know, it's probably worth it if you're a Dune fan, you know. But if you're not a Dune fan, you're just kind of, you know, you've heard about this game, and you know Dune's kind of a popular IP. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if you'd get into it. I don't know if I would be into it as much as if this wasn't Dune. I don't know. It's an enigma. It really is an enigma. There's not any games really like this where it allows players to feel some of the psychology mechanically. I don't know. I don't know if it's just because I'm that invested in the source material and I like it so much. It's an enigma. I mean, it's definitely an experience. I would say if you're really into gaming or whatever, like just try it. You know, if you're like, I want to try all this different gaming stuff. You know, I like all the different games and I'm a gaming nut. Then I would say give it a try. Okay, so thanks.